What would you say if a cop smiled at you and asked, "You don't mind if I take a quick look, right?" If you say yes, you can give away your rights in under 3 seconds. And once that search starts, you do not control where it goes. Hit subscribe right now because you will not remember this under stress. Tap like too because you need these lines in your head before your next traffic stop, not during it. Here's what you're about to learn, and you need every part of it. You're going to get 3 calm sentences you can actually remember. You're going to learn when to say them, how to say them, and why your tone matters, almost as much as your words. You're also going to see how one polite mistake can turn a simple stop into a full search of your car, your bags, and your day. Most people have no idea how fast a normal stop can change. Here's the reality. Officers often ask for consent in a way that sounds casual, friendly, and harmless. But your answer can decide whether you drive away in 5 minutes or stand on the curb while your whole car gets picked apart. If you stay calm, you keep your power. If you get talkative, nervous, or eager to please, you make their job much easier. Now let's talk about why this matters to you so much. A lot of drivers think the danger starts when cuffs come out. It doesn't. It starts the second you try too hard to seem innocent. You start explaining where you were. You start joking. You start saying stuff like, "I've got nothing to hide," or "Go ahead." That feels polite, it feels smart, but it can wreck your protection. Let me show you exactly what goes wrong. Once you give consent, you usually can't take back the damage already done. And if the officer finds anything illegal, or even something that creates more questions, your one little yes becomes the center of the whole case. You do not have to be rude. You do not have to argue. You do not have to act like a lawyer. You just need a few calm lines and the discipline to repeat them. The first sentence you need is the big one. This is the line that stops you from handing over your rights for free. Here's exactly what you say. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Word for word. Memorize that line. Say it calmly. Say it clearly. Say it once, and if needed, say it again the same way. This works because consent is permission. If you give permission, the officer can use that against you later by saying you agreed. If you refuse, the officer may still search if there is some other legal reason, but now your answer is on the record. That matters a lot. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it draws a bright line. You gave no permission. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection when the officer is just fishing for a yes. Bad way. Most drivers say, I guess that's fine, I don't have anything. Then a simple stop becomes a search, and now every bag, box, and jacket matters. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Then the officer has to decide whether there is some real legal reason to keep going. Watch what happens when you use that line the right way. You don't argue about the Constitution. You don't ask, "Why did I do something wrong?" You don't laugh and say, "Sure, if it makes you happy." You stay steady, your voice stays normal, your hands stay visible, your words stay short. That calm delivery matters because nervous talking creates openings. Calm refusal closes them. This is 100% legal. You have a search and seizure right under the Fourth Amendment, which is just the rule that the government can't do unreasonable searches. One key case is Schneckloth versus Bustamonte. In plain English, the Supreme Court said consent searches are valid when your consent is voluntary. The court also said officers do not have to tell you that you can refuse. Think about how important that is for you. They do not have to warn you. So you must warn yourself by saying no out loud. There's another reason this line is so important. If you say yes to a search of your car, you may be giving more than you think. In Florida versus Mimms, the Supreme Court said general consent to search a car can reach containers inside the car, if they could hold what the officer claims to be looking for. That means your "sure" can spread to bags, boxes, and other closed items. Let me show you exactly why you never leave this vague. If you don't consent, you force the officer to rely on some other legal basis. If you do consent, you help build the path for the search yourself. Bad way. Most drivers say, "Yeah, go ahead, I've got nothing to hide." Then the officer gets to say, "You opened the door yourself." Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Then your position stays clean, simple, and hard to twist. Have you ever been asked to just let them take a quick look during a stop? Tell me in the comments, because once you hear how common that is, you'll never hear that question the same way again. The second sentence you need is the one that tells you where you stand. Here's exactly what you say. "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Those exact words. Keep your voice flat. No attitude, no challenge, just the question. Here's the reality. A lot of stops turn ugly because drivers never find out whether the stop is actually over. The ticket part ends, but the talking does not. That is where people get trapped. The officer keeps chatting, then comes the request to search, then comes more waiting, then maybe a dog. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. If the reason for the traffic stop is done, the officer usually cannot keep you there longer. Just to go on a fishing trip unless there is some new legal reason. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. The case you need to know is Rodriguez versus United States. In plain English, the Supreme Court said officers can't stretch a traffic stop longer than needed just to do extra investigation like a dog sniff unless they have separate reasonable suspicion. That means the mission of the stop matters. License check, registration, insurance, ticket, or warning. Done. If that part is over, your question forces clarity. Are you free to go, or are you still being held? Former police officers have confirmed this works because it changes the moment. It forces a yes or no answer. If the officer says you're free to leave, you leave calmly. You do not stay and chat. You do not stay to prove you're nice. You leave. If the officer says you are being detained, then you know this is no longer a casual conversation. That helps you stop talking and start protecting yourself. Bad way. Most drivers say, no, I can stay. What do you need? Then the stop keeps growing and your own politeness keeps you stuck there. Good way. Smart drivers say, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Then the officer has to show you whether this is a real detention or just a request. Watch what happens when you ask this the right way. The officer now has to define the moment. That matters for you later. It matters if the stop gets challenged. It matters if the officer tries to act like you stayed by choice. And it matters because your calm question can shut down the endless small talk that gets people into trouble. You're not being difficult. You're asking for your status. That is a huge difference. This is 100% legal too. You are allowed to ask if you are free to leave. You're allowed to know whether you are detained. And once you know, your next move becomes much clearer. If free, go. If detained, stop volunteering information. The third sentence is the one that protects you when the officer keeps pushing. Listen closely because this is critical. Sometimes the officer does not need your consent to order you out of the car. Sometimes the officer may search anyway and say they have another reason. That is why your third sentence must separate cooperation from permission. Here's exactly what you say. I will comply with lawful orders, but I do not consent. That sentence is gold for you. You say this when the officer tells you to step out. You say this when the officer tells you to move to the curb. You say this when the officer starts acting like your obedience means agreement. Your job is not to win the argument on the roadside. Your job is to make your position clear while staying safe. You comply with lawful orders. You do not fight. You do not pull away. You do not block the search. But you do not help them claim you agreed. This matters because a lot of drivers confuse refusal with resistance. Those are not the same thing. You can refuse consent and still comply physically. That is the smart move. In Pennsylvania versus Mimms, the Supreme Court said an officer can order a driver out of a lawfully stopped car. So if you're ordered out, get out. If you're a passenger, a similar rule from Maryland versus Wilson lets officers order passengers out too. But your compliance does not erase your refusal. That is the whole point of this line. Bad way. Most drivers say, fine, whatever, do what you want. Then later it sounds like you agreed to everything. Good way. Smart drivers say, I will comply with lawful orders, but I do not consent. Then you stay safe without giving permission. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection when the stop gets tense. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it lowers heat while keeping your rights on the record. And if an officer tries a bluff like, if you don't let me search, I'll just get a warrant, your answer does not change. You keep it calm. You keep it short. You keep refusing consent. There's another case you should know. In Bumper v. North Carolina, the Supreme Court said, consent is not real consent. If police claim they have a warrant when they do not. In plain English, fake authority does not create valid permission. So, if you feel pressured, your line still stays the same. I will comply with lawful orders, but I do not consent. You are not debating. You are preserving your position. Most people already clicked away. If you're still here, you're the one who will actually remember this in a real stop. Drop a comment saying, I'm still here, because the next part ties all three sentences together and makes them usable under pressure. Now let's connect the legal side. Schneckloth v. Bustamonte says consent counts if given freely, and police do not have to remind you. Florida v. Humano says broad consent can reach containers. Rodriguez v. United States says police cannot drag out a traffic stop. Pennsylvania v. Mimms says officers can order you out of the car. Now let's see this in the real world. You're driving home. Your taillight is out. The officer asks for license and registration. You give them. Then the officer asks to look inside. You say, Officer, I do not consent to any searches. He says, step out. You step out and say, I will comply with lawful orders, but I do not consent. He searches anyway. You stay calm. Your side of the story stays clean because you never gave permission. Next video, I'm revealing what to say when cops claim they smell weed. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Smash like if these 3 sentences just gave you a plan you can use. And drop a comment telling me which line you're going to memorize first. Stay calm, stay smart, and stay safe out there.